Good evening, my little creatures of the night. Mr. Wendigo back again with your late night creature feature. Before we begin, I'm curious. Where are you listening from tonight? Alone in your room? Driving through empty roads? Drop a comment and let me know. I like knowing who's out there in the dark with me. Now then, let's see what tonight's tale brings us. The Borestone Directive. The forest went quiet at 11:47 p.m. Shirley noticed it first. She was sitting at the RV's fold-out table, nursing a cup of instant coffee that had gone cold an hour ago, when the sound just stopped. No crickets. No owls. No wind through the pines. Nothing but the hum of the space heater and the soft tick of the propane gauge. Sam, she kept her voice low. Sam, wake up. Her brother stirred in the overhead bunk, groaning. What time is it? Listen. He went still. In the silence, she could hear his breathing change, could hear the moment he understood that something was wrong. That's not normal, he said. No, it's not. They'd been living out of the RV for 3 months now, ever since the landlord back in Portland had finally made good on his threats. Sam called it voluntary simplification. Shirley called it what it was, poverty, with a nicer name. But the spot they'd found wasn't bad, all things considered. A clearing at the edge of the Borestone Mountain wilderness, far enough from town that nobody asked questions, close enough that they could make supply runs when they needed to. The forest was dense and dark, but it was also free, and free was the only price they could afford. Shirley had felt strange since they'd arrived. Not bad, strange, just familiar, like she'd been here before, even though she was certain she hadn't. Sometimes she'd catch herself staring at the tree line, expecting something, though she couldn't say what. Sam noticed. He always noticed. You okay? He'd ask, watching her with those careful eyes of his. Fine, she'd say. Just tired. But she wasn't tired. She was waiting. For what? She didn't know. Now she knew. Sam climbed down from the bunk, moving carefully, like he was afraid of making noise. He crossed to the window above the sink and pulled back the curtain just enough to see outside. The tree line was 30 feet away, close enough to see shapes in the moonlight, close enough to see that something was standing between the pines. Shirley. His voice was strange, flat, controlled, the voice of someone who'd been trained to stay calm in emergencies. Come here, slowly. She moved to the window, looked out. There were 3 of them, tall, too tall, with limbs that bent at angles that made her stomach clench. Pale skin stretched over frames that weren't quite human, weren't quite anything she had a name for. They stood motionless at the edge of the trees, watching the RV with eyes that caught the moonlight like mirrors. One of them opened its mouth. Help me, her mother's voice. Her mother who'd been dead for 6 years. Shirley, please. I'm so cold. Let me in. She stumbled backward, knocking over her coffee cup, the brown liquid spreading across the table like a stain. Don't listen, Sam said. His hand was on her arm, firm, almost too firm. Whatever you hear, don't listen. It's not real. How do you know it's real? Her voice was shaking. How do you know anything about this? He didn't answer, just kept watching the tree line with those careful, calculating eyes. The creatures didn't approach. They just stood there, 3 pale figures in the moonlight, watching the RV like scientists observing an experiment. One of them tilted its head, a gesture that was almost human, almost curious. Shirley, a different voice now, a child's voice, high and sweet. Shirley, don't you remember me? Don't you remember where you came from? I don't have memories of... Don't engage, Sam cut her off. Don't respond to anything they say. They're testing you, seeing what gets a reaction. Testing her, not them, her. Shirley filed that away for later. They stayed at the window all night, watching the creatures, being watched in return. The things never moved, never blinked, never did anything except stand and observe. When the first gray light of dawn touched the mountains, they retreated into the forest, melting into the shadows like they'd never been there at all. "What the hell was that?" Shirley's voice was hoarse from a night of not speaking. "What were those things?" "I don't know." Sam was already moving, pulling on his boots, grabbing his jacket. "But we're not staying here to find out. Pack what you can. We're leaving." "And going where?" "There's a guy a few miles down the mountain. Big John Jenkins. Old survivalist. Lives off the grid. If anyone knows what's happening in these woods, it's him." "How do you know about him?" Sam hesitated, just for a second, just long enough for Shirley to notice. "Research," he said. "I always research where we're staying. You know that." She didn't know that, actually, but she let it go. They packed quickly, Shirley throwing clothes and food into bags while Sam checked the perimeter of the RV. When he came back inside, his face was pale. "You need to see this." The tracks circled the RV in a perfect ring. Bare footprints, elongated, the toes too long and bent at strange angles. They went around and around the vehicle, dozens of circuits, like something had been pacing all night, patient and methodical. But one set of tracks led away from the others, directly to the RV's door, and stopped. "He was right here," Shirley whispered. "Right outside the door. And I didn't try to get in." Sam's voice was strange. "It could have. The lock on that door wouldn't stop anything, but it didn't even try." "Why not?" He looked at her for a long moment, something unreadable in his eyes. "I don't know," he said finally. "Let's go." Big John Jenkins lived in a cabin that looked like it had grown out of the mountain itself. Hand-hewn logs, a roof covered in moss, smoke rising from a chimney that was more rust than metal. A man stood on the porch as they pulled up, a rifle cradled in his arms like a sleeping child. He was enormous, 6'5" at least, with a beard that reached his chest and hands that could palm a basketball, but his eyes were kind, crinkled at the corners from years of squinting into mountain sunlight. "You the Parks?" he called out as they climbed from the RV. "Been expecting you." Shirley stopped. "Expecting us? How?" "Word travels fast out here, even when there's no one to carry it." He lowered the rifle, gestured toward the cabin. "Come inside. We got a lot to talk about, and not much time to do it." The cabin's interior was surprisingly comfortable. Worn furniture, a wood stove radiating heat, shelves lined with books and canned food. Big John settled into a chair that creaked under his weight and gestured for them to sit. "You saw them last night," he said. "It wasn't a question. The tall ones, the Watchers." "You know what they are?" Sam asked. "I know they've been getting bolder for the past 6 months. I know they come from somewhere inside the mountain. I know they're not natural, not supernatural either, before you ask. They're made, manufactured, government project, maybe, or some private company playing God." He leaned forward, his eyes locked on Shirley. "And I know they're very, very interested in your sister." Shirley felt a chill run down her spine. Why me? That's the question, isn't it? They've been watching these woods for months, but they never came close to any of the cabins, never approached any of the hunters or hikers. Then you two show up, and suddenly they're circling your RV like sharks smelling blood. His eyes narrowed. "What makes you special, Miss Park?" "Nothing. I'm nobody. I work temp jobs and live in an RV with my brother. There's nothing special about me." Big John didn't look convinced. "Sam, you got anything to add?" Sam's jaw tightened. "No, nothing." The two men stared at each other for a long moment, something passing between them that Shirley couldn't read. "All right then," Big John said finally. If we're going to play it that way, fine. But those things aren't going to wait forever. They want something. And in my experience, creatures like that don't stop until they get it. So what do? Shirley asked. We find out where they're coming from. There's a door in the mountain, steel, industrial, hidden behind a rock fall about 3 miles north. I've been watching it for months. Never had the manpower to investigate. Now I do. You want us to go into their nest? I want to know what we're dealing with. Can't fight what you don't understand. Big John stood, his joints popping like gunfire. We leave at dawn. Get some rest. Tomorrow, we're going into Borestone Mountain. The entrance was exactly where Big John said it would be. A steel door set into the rock face, half hidden behind a fall of boulders that looked natural but wasn't. The metal was weathered, covered in decades of grime and lichen, but the lock was modern, electronic, blinking a soft red in the mountain shadows. Government grade, Big John muttered, examining the keypad. Military, maybe, or contractor. Either way, someone spent serious money hiding this place. Can you get us in? Sam asked. Son, I spent 30 years doing things for Uncle Sam that officially never happened. There isn't a door built that I can't open. He pulled a small device from his pack, connected it to the keypad with a cable that looked homemade. Numbers flickered across a tiny screen. A minute passed, then 2. The forest around them was silent, that same unnatural silence that had surrounded the RV, watching, waiting. Then the lock clicked, and the red light turned green. Ladies first, Big John said, but his eyes were on Shirley again, watching, waiting. She didn't know why, but she wasn't afraid. She should have been terrified, walking into a hidden government facility that might be filled with the creatures that had surrounded her RV, the things that spoke with her dead mother's voice. But instead she felt calm, like she was exactly where she was supposed to be, like she was coming home. The corridor beyond the door was dark, lit only by emergency strips along the floor that cast everything in a sickly green glow. The air smelled of chemicals and something else, something organic and wrong. Like a hospital mixed with a slaughterhouse, like birth and death happening in the same room. Their footsteps echoed off concrete walls as they descended, the tunnel sloping steadily downward into the mountain's heart. The walls were lined with pipes and cables, industrial infrastructure designed to support something massive. Every 100 feet, they passed another steel door, each one marked with numbers and letters that meant nothing to Shirley but made Sam's jaw tighten every time he saw them. Stay close, Sam whispered. His hand found her arm again, that too firm grip. Stay right behind me. I can take care of myself. Shirley, please, just trust me, okay? There was something in his voice she'd never heard before. Desperation, maybe, or guilt. Okay, she said. I trust you. But she wasn't sure that was true anymore. The tunnel opened into a larger space, a chamber carved from the living rock, so vast that the ceiling disappeared into darkness above them. Equipment hummed and blinked throughout the space, machines whose purpose Shirley couldn't begin to guess. Computer banks lined the walls, their screens displaying data streams and biological readouts and images that looked like CT scans of bodies that weren't quite human. And tanks, rows and rows of tanks, floor to ceiling, filling the chamber like a warehouse of horrors. Each one was 8 feet tall, 4 feet wide, filled with fluid that glowed a soft, pulsing blue. The light from the tanks cast everything in an underwater glow, making the 3 intruders look like drowned corpses walking through an aquarium of nightmares. Things floated in the tanks. Shirley walked toward them, drawn by something she couldn't name, unable to look away even as her brain screamed at her to run. The shapes behind the glass were human, or had been once. Now there was something else, bodies stretched and reconfigured, limbs elongated to impossible proportions, skin gone pale and translucent so you could see the organs working underneath. Some had too many joints. Some had features that seemed to shift and flow even as she watched, faces that couldn't decide what they wanted to look like. Some of them were clearly dead, their eyes open and empty, their bodies motionless in the blue fluid. Failed experiments, she realized. Mistakes. Things that hadn't survived whatever process had made them. Others weren't dead. One of them turned its head as she approached. Its eyes found hers through the glass, and its mouth moved, forming words that the fluid swallowed. Bubbles rose from its lips, carrying sound that couldn't escape. But Shirley heard it anyway, inside her head, clear as a bell. "Sister," it said. "Sister, you came back. We've been waiting so long. We knew you'd come back." "Shirley, get away from there," Sam's voice, sharp and commanding. "It's talking to me. It knows me. How does it know me?" "It doesn't. It's a trick. Some kind of psychological manipulation. The things in those tanks, they're designed to. They're made to." He was struggling, trying to explain something without revealing too much. "Just get away from thee." "Hello, Shirley." The voice came from behind them, calm, cultured. The voice of someone who'd spent their whole life being the smartest person in the room and knew it. The voice of someone who had never doubted anything, least of all himself. They turned. Dr. Frank Sokolov stood in a doorway that hadn't been there a moment ago, flanked by two men in military gear carrying weapons that looked more advanced than anything Shirley had seen outside of science fiction movies. He was smaller than Shirley expected, slight, gray-haired, with wire-rimmed glasses and the soft hands of someone who'd never done manual labor. He wore a white lab coat over an expensive suit, the kind of combination that said, "I do important work and I want you to know it." But his eyes were sharp, calculating, the eyes of a predator wearing a professor's face. He looked at Shirley the way a collector looks at a rare artifact finally returned to its proper place. "I was wondering when you'd find your way home," he said, and he was looking directly at her, only at her. "Like Sam and Big John didn't exist at all. You've been gone for so long, we were starting to think you'd forgotten about us entirely." "I don't know you," Shirley said, but her voice wavered. "I've never been here before." "Haven't you?" Sokolov's smile was gentle, almost paternal, the smile of a teacher about to share a favorite lesson. "Tell me, Shirley, what's your earliest memory?" She opened her mouth to answer, then stopped. What was her earliest memory? She remembered being a teenager, remembered high school with its fluorescent lights and cruel hierarchies and the constant feeling of not fitting in. She remembered bad jobs and worse apartments and the slow slide into poverty that had ended with her and Sam living in an RV at the edge of the wilderness. But before that, childhood, her parents? There was nothing. Fragments, images that felt more like photographs than lived experiences. A house she wasn't sure was real, with yellow curtains in the kitchen that might have been a movie set for all she knew. A mother's face she couldn't quite focus on, features that blurred every time she tried to remember them clearly. A father who was nothing but a silhouette, a shape without details, a placeholder where a person should have been. "You're starting to understand," Sokolov said, watching her face with the intensity of a scientist observing a crucial experiment. "That's good. That means the conditioning is finally breaking down. I told them it wouldn't hold forever, that the human mind eventually rejects fabricated memories, but budgets are budgets and timelines are timelines." He shook his head with mock regret. "You were supposed to have another decade at least, but something about being near Borestone again seems to have accelerated the degradation. Fascinating, really. The mountain calls to you. The place where you were born." "That's impossible. I'm human. I've always been human." Human is such a limited word. It assumes a fixed state, a static condition. But nothing is static, Shirley. Not species, not individuals, not even DNA. Everything evolves. Everything changes. You're so much more than human now. We made you that way. Carefully, deliberately, with all the precision that modern science allows. He gestured at the tanks around them, at the bodies floating in blue fluid, at the experiments that had failed and the experiments that had succeeded. 23 years ago, you were born in this facility, not born the way other humans are born, but manufactured, engineered, every strand of your DNA selected and modified for optimal performance. You were raised here until you were 5 years old, educated, tested, refined. We taught you to speak, to walk, to mimic human behavior so perfectly that no one would ever suspect you were anything else. No, that's not. Then we released you into the general population to see how you'd adapt, how you'd integrate, whether the modifications would remain stable in an uncontrolled environment. We gave you false memories, a false identity, a false sense of self. We erased everything you were and replaced it with everything we needed you to be. Shirley's head was spinning, the tanks, the bodies, the blue light, Sokolov's calm voice explaining horrors like they were weather reports. It was too much, too impossible, too true. Because it felt true. That was the worst part. It felt like a key sliding into a lock, like a puzzle piece finding its place, like the answer to a question she'd been asking her whole life without knowing she was asking it. Why had she never fit in? Why had she always felt like she was wearing a costume, playing a part, pretending to be someone she wasn't? Why did her memories feel like movies she'd watched rather than experiences she'd lived? "Sam," she said, turning to her brother. Her voice was desperate now, pleading. "Tell him he's wrong. Tell him this is insane. Tell me something, anything, that proves I'm not what he says I am." Sam's face was pale, white as paper. He wasn't looking at Sokolov. He was looking at her, and his eyes were full of something she'd never seen there before. Not surprise, not denial, guilt. "I'm sorry, Shirley. I'm so sorry." "What?" "I was assigned to you when you were 12, monitor duty. My job was to watch you, report on your development, make sure you stayed stable, send updates every month, flag any unusual behavior, intervene if the conditioning started to break down." His voice cracked, split, became something raw and broken. "I wasn't supposed to get attached. That was the first rule they taught us. Never get attached to your subject. They're not people, they told us. They're prototypes, investments, property. Sam, please." "But you were just a kid, Shirley, 12 years old, scared and alone, bounced around foster homes that never quite worked out because something about you made people uncomfortable. You didn't have anyone. You didn't have anything. And He pressed his fists against his eyes. "I started to care. Genuinely care. You were smart and funny and resilient, and you trusted me. And I couldn't. I couldn't just watch you like you were a lab rat anymore. So everything was a lie. Our whole life together. All of it. Not everything. The caring part was real. The love was real. When I found out what they were planning, the next phase, what they wanted to do with you." He looked at Sokolov with hatred burning in his eyes. "I tried to get you away. That's why we've been moving so much. That's why we came here. I thought we could hide, disappear, stay off their radar. I thought if we got far enough away from Borestone, you'd never have to know. You could just live your life, be whoever you wanted to be, and the monster they designed would stay asleep forever. You knew? All this time, you knew what I was, and you didn't tell me? I was trying to protect you. By lying to me? By letting me think I was normal? That I had a brother who loved me? That I had a life? I do love you. That's why I did it. That's why I'm still trying to..." Touching. Sokolov's voice cut through the emotion like a scalpel through flesh. "Really, Sam, I'm impressed. Most handlers burn out after a few years. Compassion fatigue, we call it. The weight of pretending to care eventually crushes them, but you've stayed loyal to your subject for over a decade. The data on that alone is fascinating. The psychological profile we'll be able to build. She's not a subject. She's a person. She's always been a person. Whatever you did to her DNA. She's both, Sam. That's what makes her so valuable. A person who's also an experiment. A prototype who's also capable of love. Sokolov turned to the guards. Take them to processing. Mr. Park's usefulness is ended. We have enough data on his psychological profile to replicate it in future handlers. And Shirley, well, it's time to begin Phase 2. The guards moved forward, weapons raised, their faces blank with the professionalism of men who'd done this many times before. Big John reached for his rifle, but he was too slow. One of the guards had a taser on him before his fingers touched the stock. 50,000 volts tore through his massive body, and he went down hard, convulsing on the concrete floor, his teeth clenched so tight Shirley heard something crack. Don't struggle, Sokolov advised, his voice as calm as if he were explaining a recipe. It only makes the processing more painful. We learned that with the early subjects. He nodded toward the tanks around them, at the floating bodies, at the failures and the successes and everything in between. Some of them resisted for weeks, fought the process every step of the way. It didn't change the outcome, it just extended the suffering. "Why are you doing this?" Shirley asked. Her voice echoed in the vast chamber, bouncing off the tanks, multiplied into a chorus of questions. "What's the point of all of this?" "Evolution, my dear. Surely you can understand that." Sokolov stepped closer, his eyes bright with the fervor of a true believer, the absolute certainty of a man who had convinced himself that atrocity was salvation. Humanity as it currently exists is a dead end. We're too slow, too weak, too fragile to survive what's coming. Climate change, resource depletion, pandemic disease, nuclear war, any one of a dozen catastrophes could wipe us out within the century. The planet is dying, and we are dying with it. Unless we adapt. His eyes gleamed with an intensity that went beyond passion into something like madness. The Borestone Directive isn't about creating monsters. It's about creating survivors. A new branch of humanity that can thrive where we would perish. Bodies that can adapt to any environment. Immune systems that can defeat any pathogen. Minds that can process information faster than any computer. You're not an experiment, Shirley. You're the future of our species. You're what we need to become if we're going to have any future at all. A future nobody asked for, nobody consented to. Consent is a luxury of stable times. We don't have stable times anymore. We have a closing window of opportunity to save our species from extinction. He shrugged, a gesture so casual it was obscene given what surrounded them. History will judge me kindly, I think. The father of the new humanity, the man who ensured our survival when everyone else was too blind or too scared to do what needed to be done. History will call you a monster, perhaps, but there will be a history. There will be someone left to write it. That's what matters. The morality of the present is irrelevant compared to the survival of the species. The guards grabbed Sam, forced him to his knees. One of them pressed a gun to the back of his head, the barrel cold against his skull. Sam's face was pale, but his eyes never left Shirley's. "Wait." She lunged forward, but more hands grabbed her, held her back. Strong hands, professional hands. The hands of people who'd restrained struggling subjects before. "Please. He was trying to help me. He was trying to save me. Don't hurt him. He compromised a 23-year experiment. He tried to steal our most valuable asset. He violated every protocol, broke every rule, betrayed every trust we placed in him." Sokolov's voice hardened. "There have to be consequences, Shirley. Actions have consequences. Even well-intentioned actions, especially well-intentioned actions. He nodded to the guard. Do it. No? The scream tore out of her throat, raw and inhuman, a sound she'd never made before and didn't know she was capable of making. And something else tore out with it, a frequency, a vibration, a sound that was felt more than heard. It hit the guards like a physical force, sent them stumbling backward, clutching their ears as blood began to trickle from their noses. The lights flickered, the computers sparked and died, the tanks began to vibrate, their glass humming with resonance, hairline cracks spreading across their surfaces like frost on a window. Inside the tanks, the subjects stirred, opened their eyes, began to move, their limbs twitching, their mouths opening, their voices joining in a frequency that matched Shirley's own. Fascinating, Sokolov breathed. He hadn't fallen, hadn't been affected. He was standing there watching with the expression of a man witnessing a miracle. The sonic capability. We theorized it, but we never observed it directly. You're even more advanced than we. The first tank shattered. Blue fluid exploded across the chamber like a wave, and something unfolded from the wreckage. A creature that had been human once, that still had human eyes buried somewhere in its elongated face, but whose body had been remade into something designed for survival. It was 8 feet tall, pale as moonlight, with limbs that bent in too many places and skin that seemed to ripple like water. It looked at Shirley, not with hunger, not with rage, with recognition, with joy. "Sister," it breathed, and its voice was beautiful and terrible at the same time. "You called us. We heard you calling. We've been waiting so long for you to call." More tanks shattered, more subjects emerged, pulling themselves from the wreckage of their prisons, stretching bodies that had been confined too long, testing limbs that had never known freedom. The guards opened fire, but the bullets didn't slow them. The wounds healed too fast, the bodies adapted too quickly, the flesh becoming bulletproof even as Shirley watched. One of the guards screamed as something grabbed him from behind. Another went down under a pile of pale bodies, his weapon firing uselessly into the ceiling. The chamber dissolved into chaos, screams and gunfire and the wet sounds of bodies being torn apart by things that had once been human and were now something else entirely. Big John was on his feet somehow, his face bloody from where he'd bitten through his own lip during the taser shock. His hands were around the throat of one of the remaining guards, and he was squeezing with the strength of a man who had nothing left to lose. "Go!" he bellowed, his voice cutting through the chaos. "Get out of here. I'll hold them off." "John, no, you can't." "I said go!" He reached for his belt, pulled out something that looked like a grenade. Old military issue, the kind of thing he'd kept from his years of service, the kind of thing that was definitely illegal but might save their lives. I always figured I'd die in a mountain. Might as well be this one. Might as well be doing something that matters. Big John, take care of your sister, Sam. Whatever she is, whatever they made her, she's still in there. The person you've been protecting for all these years, she's still in there somewhere. Don't let them take that away. Don't let her forget who she was. He pulled the pin. "Now run!" Sam grabbed Shirley's hand, pulled her toward a corridor she hadn't noticed before, a service tunnel marked with emergency exit signs. Behind them, more tanks were shattering, more subjects were emerging, and Big John Jenkins was laughing, actually laughing as he ran toward the heart of the chaos with a live grenade in each hand. "For Maine, you bastards." The explosion knocked them off their feet. The whole mountain seemed to shake, rocks falling from the ceiling, the emergency lights flickering and dying. A second explosion followed, then a third, a chain reaction as equipment overloaded and fuel lines ruptured and decades of hidden infrastructure tore itself apart. In the darkness, Shirley heard screaming, human and inhuman alike, and the terrible sound of something massive collapsing. The tunnel behind them filled with dust and debris, cutting off the chamber, burying whatever remained. "Move!" Sam pulled her up, dragged her forward through the dark. "There's a service exit. Quarter-mile ahead. We can make it." They ran. Behind them, the screaming faded. The mountain settled, and somewhere in the rubble, something vast and terrible finally went quiet. Big John Jenkins was gone, buried under a mountain he'd helped bring down. A hero's death, if such things existed. A sacrifice that might have meant something, or might have meant nothing at all. They made it out. Shirley didn't remember most of the escape, just fragments, impressions, darkness, and Sam's hand in hers and the desperate need to keep moving forward. They emerged from a hidden door on the far side of the mountain, blinking in the afternoon sunlight like creatures crawling out of a grave. Big John was gone. The facility was buried. Sokolov was dead, had to be dead. No one could have survived that collapse. "It's over," Sam said. He was bleeding from a cut on his forehead, his clothes torn, his face gray with exhaustion. "We made it. It's over." "Is it?" Shirley looked down at her hands. They looked normal, human, but she could feel something underneath the skin, something that wanted to stretch, to reshape, to become what it had always been meant to be. "You should go," she said quietly. "Get as far away from me as you can." "Shirley," you heard what he said. "I'm not human. I never was. And whatever I'm becoming, you can't be around for it. I don't care what you are. I don't care what they made you. You're he stopped himself. You are the closest thing to family I've ever had. Real family, not assignments, not subjects. You. I'm not leaving you." "Sam," she felt tears on her face, warm against her skin. "I'm changing. I can feel it. Ever since we went into that facility, ever since I screamed and the tank shattered, something woke up, something that's been sleeping inside me for 23 years. And I don't know if there's going to be room for both of us, me and whatever I'm becoming. Then we figure it out together. Whatever happens, however you change, we figure it out. That's what family does." She wanted to believe him. God, she wanted to believe him so badly. But she could already feel herself slipping away. The change came slowly at first, so slowly that Shirley almost convinced herself it wasn't happening at all. They found a motel 3 towns over, paid cash, kept the curtains drawn, the kind of place that didn't ask questions, that had seen enough desperate people passing through that 2 more didn't register. The room smelled of cigarette smoke and desperation, but it was safe, or as safe as anything could be now. Shirley slept for 16 hours straight, and when she woke up, her eyes had changed. Still brown, still human-shaped, but with something behind them now. A second layer, like looking into a depth that went on forever. When she caught her reflection in the bathroom mirror, she had to look twice to make sure it was her own face looking back. "How do you feel?" Sam asked. He was sitting in a chair by the window, hadn't slept at all, had spent the night watching her and watching the parking lot and waiting for something terrible to happen. "Hungry, but not for food." She flexed her fingers, watching the tendons move beneath skin that seemed thinner, more translucent than before. She could see the veins now, the blood flowing, the network of capillaries that kept her alive. "I can hear your heartbeat. From across the room, I can smell what you had for breakfast 3 days ago. Eggs and toast and cheap coffee with too much sugar." Sam's face was carefully neutral, the face of a handler monitoring a subject. No, that wasn't fair. The face of a brother watching his sister become something he couldn't follow, something he couldn't understand, something that was leaving him behind with every passing hour. Does it hurt?" "No, that's the worst part. It feels good. It feels right. Like I've been wearing the wrong skin my whole life and I'm finally taking it off. Like I've been trying to breathe underwater and I just surfaced. She looked at her hands again, turned them over, studied the lines of her palms as if they held answers. Everything before feels like a dream now, a story someone told me about someone else's life. What do you want to do? His voice was careful, measured, the voice of someone who knew the answer might break him. I don't know. I don't know what I am, what I'm supposed to be, where I belong. Everything I thought I knew about myself was a lie. My childhood, my parents, even my name, all of it was programming, conditioning, stories they put in my head to keep me stable until they were ready to bring me back. Your name is real, Shirley Park. I gave it to you myself when you were 12 years old and you needed something to call yourself. Something that was yours, that nobody else chose for you. Sam's voice cracked. Whatever else was fake, that part was always true. That part was always ours. She looked at him for a long moment, this man who had lied to her for a decade, who had been assigned to monitor her like a science project, who had also risked everything to try to save her from the people who made her. He looked older than he had a week ago, smaller, human in a way that she was increasingly not. "Thank you," she said. "For trying. For caring, even if it was all built on lies." It wasn't all lies. The caring part was real. It still is. That night, she felt the first real shift. She woke up at 3 a.m. with her spine stretching, vertebrae separating and reforming into something with more flexibility, more range. The sensation was strange, not painful, exactly, but intense. Overwhelming, like her body was rewriting itself from the inside out, one cell at a time. She went to the bathroom, locked the door, stripped off her clothes, and watched in the flickering fluorescent light as her proportions changed, subtle at first, then faster, then impossible to deny. Her limbs lengthening, her joints loosening, her bones reshaping themselves into configurations that shouldn't have been possible. Her face was the last to go. She watched in the mirror as it became something that was still recognizably her, but also something else. The cheekbones higher, the eyes larger, the mouth capable of movements that human mouths couldn't make. She opened it, saw the changes there too, felt the new structures forming in her throat, her vocal cords, her tongue. Something like the creatures in the woods. Something like the things in the tanks. Something like what she had always been meant to be. "Sam?" she called out, her voice strange in her new throat, deeper, more resonant, harmonic in ways that human voices weren't supposed to be. But when she opened the bathroom door, he was gone. On the bed, a note, written in his careful handwriting, the letters precise and controlled even though his hand must have been shaking. "I'm sorry. I can't watch this. I can't watch you disappear. I thought I could handle it. I thought if I stayed close enough, loved you hard enough, I could keep you human, keep you here with me. But that was selfish. That was me trying to hold on to something that was never mine to keep. You're becoming what you were always meant to be. I can see it, even if you can't. The way you move, the way you look at things, the way your body is changing. You're not sick. You're not dying. You're being born. Finally, after 23 years, you're being born. By the time you read this, I'll be far away. Don't look for me. Don't follow me. I don't think I could survive seeing you again, seeing how much of the Shirley I knew is left, seeing what you've become. Just be whatever you need to be. Go wherever you need to go. Find the others, if that's what you want. Be with your own kind, your real family, the ones who understand what you are. And know that I loved you, the real you, whatever that means. The girl I met when she was 12 and scared and didn't have a name. The woman who laughed at my terrible jokes and made me feel like maybe I wasn't just a handler anymore. Maybe I was something more. Goodbye, Shirley. I hope you find what you're looking for. Sam. She read it twice, 3 times, 4 times, until the words blurred and she couldn't be sure if she was crying or if her tear ducts had simply stopped working the way human tear ducts were supposed to work. Then she folded it carefully and put it in her pocket, the last piece of paper with her name on it, the last proof that someone had once loved her enough to lie. And then she walked out into the night, toward the mountains, toward the place where she was born, toward the family that had been waiting for her for 23 years. The police found Sam's body 4 days later. He'd driven into a ravine somewhere in New Hampshire, lost control on a mountain road in the middle of the night. The official report said accident, exhaustion, probably. A man driving too long without sleep, pushing himself too hard, making one fatal mistake on a curve that didn't forgive mistakes. The car had tumbled 300 feet before coming to rest against a tree. The coroner estimated he died on impact, which was a kindness if it was true. No suffering, no lingering. Just a sudden stop and then nothing. Shirley knew better. She'd heard him, in her dreams, in the space between waking and sleeping where her new senses picked up things that human senses never could. The night he died, she'd heard him calling her name from somewhere far away. She'd felt him reaching out across the distance between them, across the miles of highway and forest and mountain that separated them, trying to connect one last time. She'd felt his fear, his regret, his love, even at the end, even as the car went over the edge and the world turned upside down. And then nothing, a sudden, final silence. Like a door closing, like a light going out. She should have felt grief, should have screamed, collapsed, done any of the things that humans do when they lose someone they love. She did, for about an hour, real grief deep and crushing, the kind that turns the world gray and airless and heavy. Then it started to fade. Not the way grief normally fades, slowly, over weeks, blunted by routine until you can function again. This was different, mechanical, like someone reaching into her chest and turning down a dial. The volume on her pain dropping from a roar to a whisper to static to nothing. By morning, she could think about Sam without crying. By noon, she could think about Sam without feeling anything at all. That should have terrified her. That clean, surgical erasure of something fundamentally human, it should have sent her running to the nearest town, begging someone to help, begging anyone to remind her what loss was supposed to feel like, what love was supposed to leave behind when it ended. Instead, she put his note in her jacket pocket and walked out of the motel room into a gray New Hampshire morning. She felt nothing except a pull, a direction, something calling her north, toward the mountains, toward the place where she'd been made. She traveled at night, not because the daylight hurt it didn't, but because the dark felt natural now, comfortable. Like slipping off a pair of shoes she'd been wearing her whole life and realizing her feet had never been the right shape for them. The first night, she caught herself running on all fours. Not stumbling, not crawling, running hands and feet striking the earth in a rhythm that felt more natural than walking upright ever had. She covered a quarter mile before she even noticed what she was doing. Stopped, stood up, walked like a person for 100 yards. Then she was running again, faster, through trees that blurred past, over granite ledges that should have shattered her kneecaps, up grades that should have destroyed her lungs, and it felt good. It felt like the first honest thing her body had ever done. She stopped trying to walk after that. Other things changed on the road north. Her fingernails thickened, darkened, curved into something that wasn't quite claws but wasn't fingernails anymore either. The joints in her hands loosened, gained range they'd never had, fingers gripping bark and stone with a strength that didn't belong in a 120-pound frame. Her spine popped and reformed on the second night, vertebrae separating and reseating into a new configuration that let her move low, fluid, silent through the undergrowth. A predator's architecture settling into place like it had always been there, waiting. She didn't fight it, didn't want to. That was the worst part, and she knew it in the small, shrinking corner of her mind that was still Shirley Park. She knew she should be horrified. Knew she should be mourning the body she was losing, the person she was leaving behind, but the knowing was academic now, distant. Like reading about someone else's tragedy in a newspaper and thinking that's sad before turning the page. She found them on the fourth night. A clearing deep in the Borestone wilderness, so far from any trail that no human boot had touched the ground in a century. 11 figures standing in a loose circle, pale and elongated in the moonlight, their proportions wrong in every way that mattered. They turned as she approached. No fear, no surprise, just recognition. "Sister," one of them breathed. Its voice was layered, harmonic, carrying frequencies that human ears couldn't have processed. "You came. I didn't have anywhere else to go." She joined them. Something clicked into place, not a sound but a feeling, like a radio finding its station after miles of static. Their minds touched hers, not with words but with something older, and she understood everything at once. Who they were, what they'd survived, what they were building out here in the deep forest, away from human eyes and human judgment and human fear. A colony, not a hiding spot, not a camp, the beginning of something permanent. She reached into her pocket, found Sam's note, unfolded it carefully. The handwriting was familiar. She knew it had meant something once. She knew the words on the page had made her cry, but she couldn't access the reason anymore. She stared at his name at the bottom, Sam, and tried to feel something. Anything. The memory was there, technically. She could access it like a file on a computer. His eyes crinkled when he laughed. His hands were warm. He made terrible jokes she pretended not to find funny. But the warmth behind those facts was gone, drained out like water through sand. She was holding the shape of a memory with nothing inside it, a frame with no picture. She let the note fall. The wind caught it, tumbled it into the undergrowth, and she watched it disappear and felt nothing at all. Then she turned back to the circle, and the colony, and a future that didn't include remembering what it felt like to be human. The last piece of Shirley Park blew away with that note. Nobody mourned her. The things in the clearing didn't know she'd ever existed. The woman standing among them wore her face but had already forgotten why it used to matter. The town of Greenville, Maine, population 3,200, sat at the edge of Moosehead Lake like a postcard of small-town America, quaint shops along the main drag, neighbors who waved from porches, churches with the same families in the same pews for 3 generations running, the kind of place where everyone knew everyone and nothing ever went wrong. That started changing in October. 3 separate hiking groups reported tall figures standing in the tree line along the Borestone Mountain trails, not moving, not approaching, just watching, with a stillness that made experienced outdoorsmen abandon their camps and drive home without stopping to explain why. Then the voices started. Martha Givens heard her dead husband calling from the woods behind her house at 2 in the morning. Gerald's voice, Gerald's cadence. The particular way he'd always said her name, accent on the first syllable, a little music in it, the way he'd said it every morning for 41 years of marriage. She'd buried him 3 years ago. Closed casket. She stood at her kitchen window in the dark and listened to him beg her to come outside. "Honey, please. It's cold out here. I miss you." And she gripped the counter until her knuckles turned white, and she did not move. Rick Palliser heard his daughter screaming for help somewhere deep in the pines, called her cell at 3 a.m., hands shaking so bad he could barely hit the numbers. She answered on the 4th ring, groggy, annoyed, perfectly safe in her apartment in Bangor. The screaming outside continued for another 45 minutes after he hung up. He sat on his kitchen floor with his back against the refrigerator and his hands over his ears until it stopped. A group of teenagers on a dare heard their own voices echoing back from the darkness, saying things they hadn't said, forming words they'd never spoken. One of them heard himself call out, clear as a bell, "It's safe. I found something cool. Come further in." His mouth hadn't moved. He'd been standing right there, surrounded by his friends, and every one of them had heard it. His voice, his inflection, coming from the black space between the pines, cheerful and encouraging, and absolutely wrong. They ran, all of them, didn't stop until they hit the parking lot. Nobody called the police. What would they report? The forest knows our names? The trees are talking? People just stopped going out after dark, stopped walking dogs past sunset, stopped sitting on porches once the light got thin, locked their doors, turned up their televisions, pretended the world outside their windows was the same world it had always been. It wasn't, and somewhere in the back of their minds, in the place where instinct lives, they all knew it. The waitress at May's diner mentioned it to one of her regulars, a polite older gentleman who'd been coming in every Tuesday for the past 3 months. Coffee, black, slice of apple pie. Always the corner table by the window, always pleasant, always tipped well. "Strangest thing," she said, topping off his cup. "My neighbor Martha swears she's been hearing her dead husband's voice at night, right out behind her house, in the trees." The man smiled, kind eyes, warm face, the sort of person you trust without a second thought. "Mountains play tricks," he said. "Old forests, strange acoustics. I wouldn't worry about it." "You're probably right." Dr. Frank Sokolov watched her walk back to the counter. Then he turned to the window. Beyond the town, beyond the lake, the Borestone Range rose dark and patient against the October sky. He should have been dead. The facility collapse should have killed him, would have killed anyone normal. But Sokolov hadn't been normal for a long time. 15 years of small, careful doses of the same compounds that had built Shirley and the others. Not enough to transform him, just enough to make him very, very hard to kill. Just enough to make sure the architects survived the building's demolition. He took out his phone, encrypted, untraceable, typed one message. Phase 3 authorized, breeding population viable, integration timeline accelerated. The response came in 8 seconds, from somewhere that didn't appear on any map. Proceed. He pocketed the phone, left a 20 on a $9 check, walked out into the October sunshine with the unhurried stride of a man who had all the time in the world. He did. He'd made sure of that. High above the town, where the forest met the last stretch of cleared ground before the houses began, something stood motionless against the pines. It had been Shirley Park once. It remembered that name the way you remember a street you lived on as a child, familiar, distant, belonging to someone who didn't exist anymore. It remembered a motel room and a folded note, and a man whose face it could almost picture. Almost. The details were gone. All that remained was a shape, an outline, a space where a person used to be. It could not remember what kindness felt like, could not remember grief or love, or the particular ache of laughing so hard your stomach hurt. Those were human things. Those belonged to someone else now. Below, a porch light flickered on. A door creaked open. A woman stepped out onto the back stoop in her bathrobe and stood there in the cold, staring into the dark with an expression that was equal parts hope and terror. "Gerald?" Martha Givens called, her voice thin, shaking. "Gerald, is that you? I know it sounds crazy. I know you're gone. But I keep hearing you, and I just need to know." The thing at the tree line opened its mouth. The voice that came out was perfect pitch, cadence, warmth, the particular way Gerald Givens had said his wife's name every morning for 41 years. "Martha, honey, I'm right here. Just come a little closer. I've missed you so much." Martha took one step off the porch, then another. The porch light buzzed. Moths spiraled around it in lazy circles, throwing tiny shadows across the yard. The tree line waited. "Well, well, well, boys and ghouls. That wraps up another terrorific tale from the vault." Bless Shirley's heart. Thought she was just another broke kid living out of an RV. Turns out she was Subject Zero, government property. A 23-year experiment that finally came home to roost. How tragic, how unfortunate. And Sam, our friend Sam, the handler who caught feelings for his assignment, spent a decade pretending to be family, fell in love with his own science project, and drove himself off a mountain when he couldn't watch her become the thing she was always meant to be. Noble effort. Shame about the guardrail. Just how we love it. If this story crawled under your skin, hit that subscribe button. New creature features drop every single day at 8 p.m. Central, and trust me, tomorrow's tale goes somewhere even darker. Leave a like if you're second-guessing your own memories tonight, and drop a comment you ever feel like something about your childhood doesn't quite add up, like there are gaps where the details should be. I want to hear what keeps you up at night. Remember, kiddies, not every monster is born in the dark. Some of them are built in laboratories, given fake names, and turned loose to see what happens. The scariest part isn't the claws or the voices, it's that they used to be just like you, and they don't even remember. Until next time, kiddies, keep your fires burning and your eyes on the trees. This has been your late night creature feature. I'm Mr. Wendigo, and hey, look on the bright side. At least Shirley finally found where she belongs. Sure, she forgot her own name, can't remember what love feels like, and spends her nights luring widows off their porches with dead men's voices. But hey, family is family, right? Even when they've got too many joints and a government serial number. Sweet dreams, kiddies. Sweet dreams.